doctors had to wear uniforms, patients could only be visited by close relatives, all of whom underwent strict security checks. An army major was assigned to my parents and followed them everywhere. My father was scared and my uncle kept saying, "Be very careful, some of these people might be secret agents." My family was given 3 rooms in the officers' hostel. Everyone's mobile phone was confiscated, which they said was for security reasons but may have also been to stop my father talking to the media. Anytime my parents wanted to take the short walk from the hostel to the hospital, they first had to be cleared via walkie-talkie, which took at least half an hour. They were even guarded as they crossed the hostel lawn to the dining hall. No visitors could get in, even when the Prime Minister came to see me he was not allowed inside. The security seemed astonishing, but over the last 3 years the Taliban had managed to infiltrate and attack even the most highly guarded military installations, the naval base at Mehran, the Air Force base in Qumran and the army headquarters just down the road. We were all at risk from a Taliban attack. My father was told that even my brothers would not be spared. He was very concerned because at that time Kushal was still in Mingora, although later he was brought down to Rawalpindi to join them. There were no computers or internet in the hostel, but a friendly cook, Yasim Mama, used to bring my family the newspapers and whatever they needed. Yasim told them he felt proud to prepare my family's food. They were so touched by his kindness that they shared our story with him. He wanted to nourish them with food and ease their suffering. They had no appetite, so he would try to tempt them with ever more delicious dishes, custards, and sweets. One mealtime Kushal said that the dining table felt empty with only the 4 of them. They felt incomplete without me. It was in one of Yasim's newspapers that my father read for the first time some of the incredible international reaction to my shooting. It seemed like the whole world was outraged. Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, called it a heinous and cowardly act. President Obama described the shooting as reprehensible and disgusting and tragic. But some of the reaction in Pakistan was not so positive. While some papers described me as a peace icon, others carried the usual conspiracy theories, some bloggers even questioning if I had really been shot. All sorts of stories were made up, particularly in the Urdu press, such as one that claimed I had criticized the growing of beards. One of the most vocal people against me was a female MP called Dr. Rahila Kaza from the religious Jamaat Islami party. She called me an American stooge and showed a photograph of me sitting next to Ambassador Richard Holbrooke as evidence of me hobnobbing with U.S. military authority. Dr. Fiona was a great comfort to us. My mother speaks only Pashto, so couldn't understand anything she said, but Fiona would gesture with a thumbs up when she came out of my room and say good. She became a messenger for my parents, not only a doctor. She would sit with them patiently and would then ask my father to explain every detail to my mother. My father was astonished and pleased. In our country few doctors bother explaining anything to an illiterate woman. They heard that offers were pouring in from overseas to treat me, including from America, where a top hospital called Johns Hopkins had offered free treatment. Individual Americans also offered to help, including Senator John Kerry, a rich man who had visited Pakistan many times, and Gabrielle Giffords, a congresswoman who had been shot in the head while meeting constituents at a shopping mall in Arizona. There were offers too from Germany, Singapore, the UAE, and Britain. Nobody consulted my mother and father on what should happen to me. All decisions were made by the army. General Kiani asked Dr. Javed whether I should be sent abroad or not. The army chief was spending a surprising amount of his time on the issue. Dr. Javed says they spent 6 hours discussing me. Perhaps more than any politician, he understood the political implications if I did not survive. He was hoping to build a political consensus behind launching an all-out attack on the Taliban. But also those close to him say he is a compassionate man. His own father was just an ordinary soldier and died young, leaving him as the eldest son of 8 to support his entire family. When he became army chief, the first thing General Kiani did was improve housing, food rations, and education for ordinary soldiers rather than officers. Dr. Fiona said it was likely I would have a speech impediment and a weak right arm and right leg, so I would need extensive rehabilitation facilities, which Pakistan didn't have. If you're serious about getting the best outcome possible, take her overseas, she advised. General Kiani was adamant that the Americans should not be involved because of the ongoing bad relations between the two countries after the Raymond Davis episode and the Bin Laden raid, as well as the killing of some Pakistani soldiers at a border post by a U.S. helicopter. Dr. Javed suggested Great Ormond Street in London, and specialist hospitals in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Why not your own hospital? General Kiani asked. Dr. Javed had known this was coming. Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham is known for treating British soldiers wounded in Afghanistan and Iraq. Its location outside the center of the city also offered privacy. He called his boss Kevin Bolger, the hospital's chief operating officer. He quickly agreed it was the right thing to do, although afterwards he said, "None of us ever imagined how much it would take over the hospital." Moving me, a foreign minor, to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was not a simple exercise, and Bolger soon found himself tangled in the hoops of British and Pakistani bureaucracy. Meanwhile, time was ticking away. Although my condition had been stabilized, it was felt that I needed to be moved within 48 hours, 72 at the most. Finally the go-ahead was given, and the doctors had to face the problem of how I was to be moved and who would pay for it. Dr. Javed suggested taking up an offer from the Royal Air Force, as they were used to transporting wounded soldiers from Afghanistan, but General Kiani refused. He called Dr. Javed for a late-night meeting at his house. The general keeps late hours, and explained, chain smoking as usual, that he did not want any foreign military involved. There were already too many conspiracy theories floating around about my shooting, people saying I was a CIA agent and such things, and the army chief did not want to further fuel them. This left Dr. Javed in a difficult position. The British government had offered assistance but needed a formal request from the Pakistan government. But my government was reluctant to ask for fear of loss of face. Fortunately, at this point the ruling family of the United Arab Emirates stepped in. They offered their private jet, which had its own onboard hospital. I was to be flown out of Pakistan for the first time in my life in the early hours of Monday, October 15. My parents had no idea of any of these negotiations, though they knew discussions were underway to move me overseas. Naturally, they assumed that wherever I was sent, they would accompany me. My mother and brothers had no passports or documentation. On Sunday afternoon my father was informed by the colonel that I would be leaving the next morning for the UK, and only he was to accompany me, not my mother or my brothers. He was told there was a problem arranging their passports, and that for security reasons he should not even tell the rest of my family he was going. My father shares everything with my mother, and there was no way he would keep such a thing secret. He told her the news with a heavy heart. My mother was sitting with Uncle Faiz Mohammed, who was furious and worried about her and my brother's security. If she's on her own with two boys in Mingora, anything could happen to them. My father called the colonel. I have informed my family and they are very unhappy. I cannot leave them. This caused a big problem because I was a minor, so couldn't be sent alone, and many people got involved to try and convince my father to come with me, including Colonel Junaid, Dr. Javed, and Dr. Fiona. My father does not respond well to being pushed and remained firm, even though it was clear that by now he was creating havoc. He explained to Dr. Javed, "My daughter is now in safe hands and going to a safe country. I can't leave my wife and sons alone here. They are at risk. What has happened to my daughter has happened, and now she is in God's hands. I am a father, my sons are as important to me as my daughter." Dr. Javed asked to see my father privately. "Are you sure this is the only reason you are not coming?" he asked. He wanted to make sure no one was pressuring him. "My wife told me, you can't leave us," my father said. The doctor put a hand on his shoulder and reassured my father that I would be taken care of and he could trust him. "Isn't it a miracle you all happened to be here when Malala was shot?" said my father. It is my belief God sends the solution first and the problem later, replied Dr. Javed. My father then signed an in loco parentis document making Dr. Fiona my guardian for the trip to the UK. My father was in tears as he gave her my passport and took her hand. Fiona, I trust you. Please take care of my daughter. Then my mother and father came to my bedside to say goodbye. It was around 11 p.m. when they saw me for the last time in Pakistan. I could not speak, my eyes were shut, and it was only my breath that reassured them I was still alive. My mother cried, but my father tried to comfort her as he felt I was now out of danger. All those deadlines they'd given at the beginning, when they said the next 24 hours were dangerous, 48 were crucial, 72 were critical, had all passed without incident. The swelling had gone down and my blood levels had improved. My family trusted that Dr. Fiona and Dr. Javed would give me the best possible care. When my family went back to their room, sleep was slow in coming. Just after midnight someone knocked at their door. It was one of the colonels who had earlier tried to convince my father to leave my mother behind and travel to the UK. He told my father that he absolutely had to travel with me or I might not be taken at all. I told you last night the issue was resolved, my father replied. Why did you wake me? I'm not leaving my family. Once again, another official was called to talk to him. You must go. You are her parent, and if you don't accompany her she may not be accepted into the hospital in the UK, he said. What's done is done, my father insisted. I am not changing my mind. We will all follow in a few days when the documents are sorted out. The colonel then said, let's go to the hospital as there are other documents to sign. My father became suspicious. It was after midnight and he was scared. He didn't want to go alone with the officials and insisted my mother come too. My father was so worried that for the whole time he repeated a verse of the Holy Quran over and over. It was from the story of Yunus who is swallowed by a whale, like the story of Jonah in the Bible. This verse was recited by the prophet Yunus when he was in the tummy of the whale. It reassures us that there is a way out of even the worst trouble and danger if we keep faith. When they got to the hospital, the colonel told my father that if I was to be allowed to fly to the UK then there were other documents that needed to be signed. It was simple. My father had felt so uncomfortable and scared because of the secrecy of all the arrangements, the men in uniform everywhere and the vulnerability of our family, that he had panicked and blown the incident out of proportion. The whole episode had been a matter of botched bureaucracy. When my parents finally got back to the hostel, it was with a very heavy heart. My father did not want me to come round in a strange country without my family there. He was worried about how confused I would be. My last memory would be of the school bus, and he was distraught that I would feel abandoned by them. I was taken away at 5 a.m. on Monday, October 15 under armed escort. The roads to the airport had been closed and there were snipers on the rooftops of the buildings lining the route. The UAE plane was waiting. I am told it is the height of luxury with a plush double bed, 16 first-class seats and a mini hospital at the back staffed with European nurses led by a German doctor. I am just sorry I wasn't conscious to enjoy it. The plane flew to Abu Dhabi for refueling, then headed on to Birmingham, where it landed in the late afternoon. In the hostel my parents waited. They assumed their passports and visas were being processed and they would join me in a few days. But they heard nothing. They had no phone and no access to a computer to check on my progress. The wait felt endless. Part 5. Second Life. Watan zama ziyada watan yamkada watan do param ramkuz hala yama. I am a patriot and I love my country, and for that I would gladly sacrifice all. 23. The girl shot in the head, Birmingham. I woke up on October 16, a week after the shooting. I was thousands of miles away from home with a tube in my neck to help me breathe and unable to speak. I was on the way back to critical care after another CT scan, and flitted between consciousness and sleep until I woke properly. The first thing I thought when I came round was, thank God I'm not dead. But I had no idea where I was. I knew I was not in my homeland. The nurses and doctors were speaking English, though they seemed to all be from different countries. I was speaking to them, but no one could hear me because of the tube in my neck. To start with, my left eye was very blurry and everyone had 2 noses and 4 eyes. All sorts of questions flew through my waking brain. Where was I? Who had brought me there? Where were my parents? Was my father alive? I was terrified. Dr. Javed, who was there when I was brought round, says he will never forget the look of fear and bewilderment on my face. He spoke to me in Urdu. The only thing I knew was that Allah had blessed me with a new life. A nice lady in a headscarf held my hand and said, "Assalamu alaikum," which is our traditional Muslim greeting. Then she started saying prayers in Urdu and reciting verses of the Quran. She told me her name was Rihanna and she was the Muslim chaplain. Her voice was soft and her words were soothing, and I drifted back to sleep. I dreamed I wasn't really in hospital. When I woke again the next day, I noticed I was in a strange green room with no windows and very bright lights. It was an intensive care cubicle in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Everything was very clean and shiny, not like the hospital in Mingora. A nurse gave me a pencil and a pad. I couldn't write properly. The words came out wrong. I wanted to write my father's phone number. I couldn't space letters. Dr. Javed brought me an alphabet board so I could point to the letters. The first words I spelt out were father and country. The nurse told me I was in Birmingham, but I had no idea where that was. Only later did they bring me an atlas so I could see it was in England. I didn't know what had happened. The nurses weren't telling me anything. Even my name. Was I still Malala? My head was aching so much that even the injections they gave me couldn't stop the pain. My left ear kept bleeding and my left hand felt funny. Nurses and doctors kept coming in and out. The nurses asked me questions and told me to blink twice for yes. No one told me what was going on or who had brought me to the hospital. I thought they didn't know themselves. I could feel that the left side of my face wasn't working properly. If I looked at the nurses or doctors for too long, my left eye watered. I didn't seem to be able to hear from my left ear and my jaw wouldn't move properly. I gestured to people to stand on my right. Then a kind lady called Dr. Fiona came and gave me a white teddy bear. She said I should call it Junaid and she would explain why later. I didn't know who Junaid was, so I named it Lily. She also brought me a pink exercise book to write in. The first 2 questions my pen wrote were, "Why have I no father?" and "My father has no money. Who will pay for all this?" "Your father is safe," she replied. "He is in Pakistan. Don't worry about payment." I repeated the questions to anyone who came in. They all said the same. But I was not convinced. I had no idea what had happened to me and I didn't trust anyone. If my father was fine, why wasn't he here? I thought my parents didn't know where I was and could be searching for me in the chowks and bazaars of Mingora. I didn't believe my parents were safe. Those first days my mind kept drifting in and out of a dream world. I kept having flashbacks to lying on a bed with men around me, so many that you couldn't count, and asking, "Where is my father?" I thought I had been shot but wasn't sure. Were these dreams or memories? I was obsessed by how much this must be costing. The money from the awards had almost all gone on the school and buying a plot of land in our village in Shangla. Whenever I saw the doctors talking to one another, I thought they were saying, "Malala doesn't have any money. Malala can't pay for her treatment." One of the doctors was a Polish man who always looked sad. I thought he was the owner of the hospital and was unhappy because I couldn't pay. So I gestured at a nurse for paper and wrote, "Why are you sad?" He replied, "No, I am not sad." "Who will pay?" I wrote. "We don't have any money." "Don't worry, your government will pay," he said. Afterwards he always smiled when he saw me. I always think about solutions to problems, so I thought maybe I could go down to the reception of the hospital and ask for a phone to call my mother and father. But my brain was telling me, You don't have the money to pay for the call, nor do you know the country code. Then I thought, I need to go out and start working to earn money so I can buy a phone and call my father so we can all be together again. Everything was so mixed up in my mind. I thought the teddy bear Dr. Fiona had given me was green and had been swapped with a white one. Where's the green teddy? I kept asking, even though I was told over and over there was no green teddy. The green was probably the glow of the walls in the intensive care unit, but I'm still convinced there was a green teddy. I kept forgetting English words. One note to the nurses was a wire to clean my teeth. It felt like something was stuck between them, and I meant floss. Actually, my tongue was numb and my teeth were fine. The only thing that calmed me was when Rihanna came. She said healing prayers and I started moving my lips to some of them and mouthing Amen, our word for amen, at the end. The television was kept off, except once when they let me watch MasterChef, which I used to watch in Mingora and loved, but everything was blurred. It was only later I learned that people were not allowed to bring in newspapers or tell me anything, as the doctors were worried it could traumatize me. I was terrified that my father could be dead. Then Fiona brought in a Pakistani newspaper from the week before, which had a photograph of my father talking to General Kyani with a shawled figure sitting at the back next to my brother. I could just see her feet. "That's my mother," I wrote. Later that day Dr. Javed came in with his mobile phone. "We're going to call your parents," he said. My eyes shone with excitement. "You won't cry, you won't weep," he instructed me. He was gruff but very kind, like he had known me forever. "I will give you the mobile and be strong." I nodded. He dialed the number, spoke, and then gave me the phone. There was my father's voice. I couldn't talk because of the tube in my neck. But I was so happy to hear him. I couldn't smile because of my face, but it was as if there was a smile inside. "I'll come soon," he promised. "Now have a rest and in 2 days we will be there." Later he told me that Dr. Javed had also ordered him not to cry, as that would make us all sadder. The doctor wanted us to be strong for each other. The call did not last long because my parents did not want to tire me out. My mother blessed me with prayers. I still presumed that the reason they weren't with me was because my father didn't have the money to pay for my treatment. That's why he was still in Pakistan, to sell our land in the village and also our school. But our land was small and I knew our school buildings and our house were rented, so what could he sell? Perhaps he was asking rich people for a loan. Even after the call, my parents were not completely reassured. They hadn't actually heard my voice and were still cut off from the outside world. People who visited them were bringing conflicting reports. One of those visitors was Major General Ghulam Kamar, head of military operations in SWAT. "There is good news coming from the UK," he told my father. "We are very happy our daughter has survived." He said "our" because now I was seen as the daughter of the nation. The general told my father that they were carrying out door-to-door searches throughout SWAT and monitoring the borders. He said they knew that the people who had targeted me came from a gang of 22 Taliban men and that they were the same gang who had attacked Zahid Khan, my father's friend who had been shot 2 months earlier. My father said nothing, but he was outraged. The army had been saying for ages that there were no Taliban in Mingora and that they had cleared them all out. Now this general was telling him that there had been 22 of them in our town for at least 2 months. The army had also insisted Zahid Khan was shot in a family feud and not by the Taliban. Now they were saying I had been targeted by the same Taliban as him. My father wanted to say, "You knew there were Taliban in the valley for 2 months. You knew they wanted to kill my daughter and you didn't stop them." But he realized it would get him nowhere. The general hadn't finished. He told my father that although it was good news that I had regained consciousness, there was a problem with my eyesight. My father was confused. How could the officer have information he didn't? He was worried that I would be blind. He imagined his beloved daughter, her face shining, walking around in lifelong darkness asking, "Abba, where am I?" So awful was this news that he couldn't tell my mother, even though he is usually hopeless at keeping secrets, particularly from her. Instead he told God, "This is unacceptable. I will give her one of my own eyes." But then he was worried that at 43 years old his own eyes might not be very good. He hardly slept that night. The next morning he asked the major in charge of security if he could borrow his phone to call Colonel Junaid. "I have heard that Malala can't see," my father told him in distress. "That's nonsense," he replied. "If she can read and write, how can she not see? Dr. Fiona has kept me updated, and one of the first notes Malala wrote was to ask about you. Far away in Birmingham, not only could I see but I was asking for a mirror. Mirror, I wrote in the pink diary, I wanted to see my face and hair. The nurses brought me a small white mirror which I still have. When I saw myself, I was distraught. My long hair, which I used to spend ages styling, had gone, and the left side of my head had none at all. Now my hair is small," I wrote in the book. "I thought the Taliban had cut it off. In fact, the Pakistani doctors had shaved my head with no mercy. My face was distorted like someone had pulled it down on one side, and there was a scar to the side of my left eye. HWO did this to me." I wrote, my letters still scrambled. What happened to me? I also wrote stop lights as the bright lights were making my head ache. "Something bad happened to you," said Dr. Fiona. "Was I shot? Was my father shot?" I wrote. She told me that I had been shot on the school bus. She said 2 of my friends on the bus had also been shot, but I didn't recognize their names. She explained that the bullet had entered through the side of my left eye where there was a scar, traveled 18 inches down to my left shoulder and stopped there. It could have taken out my eye or gone into my brain. It was a miracle I was alive. I felt nothing, maybe just a bit satisfied. So they did it? My only regret was that I hadn't had a chance to speak to them before they shot me. Now they'd never hear what I had to say. I didn't even think a single bad thought about the man who shot me. I had no thoughts of revenge. I just wanted to go back to Swat. I wanted to go home. After that, images started to swim around in my head, but I wasn't sure what was a dream and what was reality. The story I remember of being shot is quite different from what really happened. I was in another school bus with my father and friends and another girl called Gul. We were on our way home when suddenly 2 Taliban appeared dressed in black. One of them put a gun to my head and the small bullet that came out of it entered my body. In this dream he also shot my father. Then everything is dark, I'm lying on a stretcher and there is a crowd of men, a lot of men, and my eyes are searching for my father. Finally I see him and try to talk to him, but I can't get the words out. Other times I am in a lot of places, in Jinnah Market in Islamabad, in China Bazaar, and I am shot. I even dreamed that the doctors were Taliban. As I grew more alert, I wanted more details. People coming in were not allowed to bring their phones, but Dr. Fiona always had her iPhone with her because she is an emergency doctor. When she put it down, I grabbed it to search for my name on Google. It was hard as my double vision meant I kept typing in the wrong letters. I also wanted to check my email, but I couldn't remember the password. On the 5th day I got my voice back, but it sounded like someone else. When Rihanna came in, we talked about the shooting from an Islamic perspective. "They shot at me," I told her. "Yes, that's right," she replied. "Too many people in the Muslim world can't believe a Muslim can do such a thing," she said. "My mother, for example, would say they can't be Muslims. Some people call themselves Muslims but their actions are not Islamic." We talked about how things happen for different reasons. This happened to me, and how education for females, not just males, is one of our Islamic rights. I was speaking up for my right as a Muslim woman to be able to go to school. Once I got my voice back, I talked to my parents on Dr. Javid's phone. I was worried about sounding strange. "Do I sound different?" I asked my father. "No," he said. You sound the same and your voice will only get better. Are you okay? He asked. Yes, I replied, but this headache is so severe, I can't bear the pain. My father got really worried. I think he ended up with a bigger headache than me. In all the calls after that he would ask, is the headache increasing or decreasing? After that I just said to him, I'm okay. I didn't want to upset him and didn't complain even when they took the staples from my head and gave me big injections in my neck. When are you coming? I kept asking. By then they had been stuck in the army hostel at the hospital in Rawalpindi for a week with no news about when they might come to Birmingham. My mother was so desperate that she told my father, if there is no news by tomorrow I will go on a hunger strike. Later that day my father went to see the major in charge of security and told him. The major looked alarmed. Within 10 minutes my father was told arrangements would be made for them to move to Islamabad later that day. Surely there they could arrange everything? When my father returned to my mother he said to her, you are a great woman. All along I thought Malala and I were the campaigners, but you really know how to protest. They were moved to Kashmir House in Islamabad, a hostel for members of parliament. Security was still so tight that when my father asked for a barber to give him a shave, a policeman sat with them all the way through so the man wouldn't cut his throat. At least now they had their phones back and we could speak more easily. Each time, Dr. Javed would call my father in advance to tell him what time he could speak to me and to make sure he was free. But when the doctor called the line was usually busy. My father is always on the phone. I rattled off my mother's 11-digit mobile number and Dr. Javed looked astonished. He knew then that my memory was fine. But my parents were still in darkness about why they weren't flying to me. Dr. Javed was also baffled as to why they weren't coming. When they said they didn't know, he made a call and then assured them the problem was not with the army but the civilian government. Later they would discover that, rather than do whatever it took to get my parents on the first plane to Birmingham to join their sick daughter, the Interior Minister Rehman Malik was hoping to fly with them so they could have a joint press conference at the hospital, and it was taking some time to make the arrangements. He also wanted to make sure they didn't ask for political asylum in Britain, which would be embarrassing for his government. Eventually he asked my parents outright if this was their plan. It was funny because my mother had no idea what asylum was and my father had never even thought about it. There were other things on his mind. When my parents moved to Kashmir House they were visited by Sonia Shahid, the mother of Shiza, our friend who had arranged the trip to Islamabad for all us Kushal school girls. She had assumed they had gone to the UK with me, and when she found out they were still in Pakistan, she was horrified. They said they had been told there were no plane tickets to Birmingham. Sonia brought them clothes as they had left everything in Swat and got my father the number for President Zardari's office. He called and left a message. That night the president spoke to him and promised everything would be sorted out. I know what it's like to be kept from one's children, he said, referring to his years in jail. When I heard they would be in Birmingham in 2 days I had one request. Bring my school bag, I pleaded to my father. If you can't go to Swat to fetch it, no matter, buy new books for me because in March it's my board examination. Of course I wanted to come first in class. I especially wanted my physics book because physics is difficult for me, and I needed to practice numericals as my maths is not so good and they are hard for me to solve. I thought I'd be back home by November. It ended up being 10 days before my parents came. Those 10 days I spent in hospital without them felt like 100 days. It was boring and I wasn't sleeping well. I stared at the clock in my room. The changing time reassured me I was alive and I saw for the first time in my life that I was waking early. Every morning I longed for 7 a.m. when the nurses would come. The nurses and Dr. Fiona played games with me. QEH is not a children's hospital so they brought over a play coordinator with games. One of my favorites was Connect 4. I usually drew with Dr. Fiona but I could beat everyone else. The nurses and hospital staff felt sorry for me in a far-off land away from my family and were very kind, particularly Ima Chaudhary, the jolly director of operations, and Julie Tracy, the head nurse, who would sit and hold my hand. The only thing I had with me from Pakistan was a beige shawl which Colonel Junaid had given to Dr. Fiona as a present for me, so they went clothes shopping to buy me things. They had no idea how conservative I was or what a teenage girl from the Swat Valley would wear. They went to Next and British Home stores and came back with bags of t-shirts, pajamas, socks, and even bras. Ima asked me if I would like shalwar kameez and I nodded. "What's your favorite color?" she asked. Pink was, of course, my reply. They were worried I wasn't eating. But I didn't like the hospital food and I was worried it was not halal. The only things I'd eat there were the nutritional milkshakes. Nurse Julie discovered I liked cheesy whatsits, so brought me those. "What do you like?" they asked me. "Fried chicken," I replied. Ima discovered there was a halal Kentucky Fried Chicken at Small Heath, so would go there every afternoon to buy me chicken and chips. One day she even cooked me a curry. To keep me occupied they brought me a DVD player. One of the first movies they got me was Bend It Like Beckham, thinking the story of a Sikh girl challenging her cultural norms and playing football would appeal to me. I was shocked when the girls took off their shirts to practice in sports bras and I made the nurses switch it off. After that they brought cartoons and Disney movies. I watched all 3 Shrek movies and A Shark's Tale. My left eye was still blurry, so I covered it when I watched, and my left ear would bleed, so I had to keep putting in cotton wool balls. One day I asked a nurse, "What is this lump?" placing her hand on my tummy. My stomach was big and hard and I didn't know why. "It's the top of your skull," she replied. I was shocked. After I started to speak I also walked again for the first time. I hadn't felt any problem with my arms or legs in bed apart from my left hand, which was stiff because the bullet had ended up by my shoulder, so I didn't realize I couldn't walk properly. My first few steps were such hard work it felt like I'd run 100 kilometers. The doctors told me I would be fine, I just needed lots of physiotherapy to get my muscles working again. One day another Fiona came, Fiona Alexander, who told me she was in charge of the hospital press office. I thought this was funny. I couldn't imagine Swat Central Hospital having a press office. Until she came I had no idea of the attention I'd attracted. When I was flown from Pakistan there was supposed to be a news blackout, but photographs were leaked from Pakistan of me leaving and saying I was going to the UK, and the media soon found out my destination was Birmingham. A Sky News helicopter was soon circling above, and as many as 250 journalists came to the hospital from as far away as Australia and Japan. Fiona Alexander had spent 20 years as a journalist herself, and had been editor of the Birmingham Post, so she knew exactly how to feed them material and stop them trying to get in. The hospital started giving daily news briefings on my condition. People just turned up wanting to see me, government ministers, diplomats, politicians, even an envoy from the Archbishop of Canterbury. Most brought bouquets, some of them exquisitely beautiful. One day Fiona Alexander brought me a bag of cards and toys and pictures. It was Eid al-Adha, Big Eid, our main religious holiday, so I thought maybe some Muslims had sent them. Then I saw the postage dates, from October 10th, October 11th, days before, and I realized it was nothing to do with Eid. They were from people all over the world wishing me a speedy recovery, many of them school children. I was astonished and Fiona laughed. "You haven't seen anything yet." She told me there were sacks and sacks more, about 8,000 cards in total, many just addressed, Malala, Birmingham Hospital. One was even addressed, the girl shot in the head, Birmingham, yet it had got there. There were offers to adopt me as if I had no family and even a marriage proposal. Rihanna told me that thousands and millions of people and children around the world had supported me and prayed for me. Then I realized that people had saved my life. I had been spared for a reason. People had sent other presents too. There were boxes and boxes of chocolates and teddy bears of every shape and size. Most precious of all perhaps was the parcel that came from Benazir Bhutto's children by Lawal and Bakhtawar. Inside were 2 shawls that had belonged to their late mother. I buried my nose in them to try and smell her perfume. Later I found a long black hair on one of them, which made it even more special. I realized what the Taliban had done was make my campaign global. While I was lying in that bed waiting to take my first steps in a new world, Gordon Brown, the UN Special Envoy for Education and former Prime Minister of Britain, had launched a petition under the slogan "I am Malala" to demand no child be denied schooling by 2015. There were messages from heads of state and ministers and movie stars, and one from the granddaughter of Sir Olaf Carrow, the last British governor of our province. She said she was ashamed at not being able to read and write Pashto although her grandfather had been fluent. Beyoncé had written me a card and posted a photo of it on Facebook, Selena Gomez had tweeted about me, and Madonna had dedicated a song. There was even a message from my favorite actress and social activist, Angelina Jolie. I couldn't wait to tell Maniba. I didn't realize then I wouldn't be going home. 24 They have snatched her smile. The day my parents flew to Birmingham I was moved out of intensive care and into room 4, ward 519, which had windows so I could look out and see England for the first time. "Where are the mountains?" I asked. It was misty and rainy, so I thought maybe they were hidden. I didn't know then that this was a land of little sun. All I could see were houses and streets. The houses were red brick and all looked exactly the same. Everything looked very calm and organized, and it was odd to see people's lives going on as if nothing had happened. Dr. Javed told me my parents were coming and tilted my bed so that I was sitting up to greet them when they arrived. I was so excited. In the 16 days since that morning when I had run out of our house in Mingora shouting goodbye, I had been in 4 hospitals and traveled thousands of miles. It felt like 16 years. Then the door opened and there were the familiar voices saying Yani and Pisho, and they were there, kissing my hands as they were frightened to touch me. I couldn't control myself and wept as loudly as I could. All that time alone in hospital I hadn't cried even when I had all those injections in my neck or the staples removed from my head. But now I could not stop. My father and mother were also weeping. It was as if all the weight had been lifted from my heart. I felt that everything would be fine now. I was even happy to see my brother Kushal, as I needed someone to fight with. "We missed you, Malala," said my brothers, though they were soon more interested in all the teddies and gifts. And Kushal and I were soon fighting again when he took my laptop to play games on. I was shocked by my parents' appearance. They were tired from the long flight from Pakistan, but that wasn't all. They looked older and I could see they both had gray hairs. They tried to hide it, but I could see they were also disturbed by how I looked. Before they came in, Dr. Javed had warned them, "The girl you will see is only 10% recovered, there is still 90% to go." But they had no idea that half my face was not working and that I couldn't smile. My left eye bulged, half my hair was gone and my mouth tilted to one side as if it had been pulled down, so when I tried to smile it looked more like a grimace. It was as if my brain had forgotten it had a left face. I also couldn't hear from one side, and I spoke in baby language as if I was a small child. My parents were put in a hostel in the university among all the students. The people in charge of the hospital thought it might be difficult for them to stay at the hospital because they would be besieged by journalists, and they wanted to protect us at this critical stage in my recovery. My parents had very little with them except the clothes they were wearing and what Shiza's mother Sonia had given them, because when they left Swat on October 9 they had no idea they wouldn't be going back. When they returned to the hostel room, they cried like children. I had always been such a happy child. My father would boast to people about my heavenly smile and heavenly laughter. Now he lamented to my mother, "That beautiful symmetrical face, that bright shining face has gone, she has lost her smile and laughter. The Taliban are very cruel, they have snatched her smile," he added. You can give someone eyes or lungs but you cannot restore their smile. The problem was a facial nerve. The doctors were not sure at that point if it was damaged and might repair itself, or if it was cut. I reassured my mother that it didn't matter to me if my face was not symmetrical. Me, who had always cared about my appearance, how my hair looked. But when you see death, things change. It doesn't matter if I can't smile or blink properly, I told her, I'm still me, Malala. The important thing is God has given me my life. Yet every time they came to the hospital and I laughed or tried to smile, my mother's face would darken as if a shadow had crossed it. It was like a reverse mirror. When there was laughter on my face there was distress on my mother's. My father would look towards my mother, who had this big question in her eyes, why was Malala like this? The girl she had brought into the world and for 15 years had been smiling. One day my father asked her, Pikai, tell me truthfully. What do you think, is it my fault? No, Kiista, she replied. You didn't send Malala out thieving or killing or to commit crimes. It was a noble cause. Even so, my father worried that in future every time I smiled it would be a reminder of the shooting. That was not the only way they found me changed. Back in SWAT I used to be a very fragile and sensitive child who would cry at the slightest thing, but in hospital in Birmingham even when I was in terrible pain I did not complain. The hospital refused to allow other visitors even though they were inundated by requests, as they wanted me to be able to concentrate on my rehabilitation in private. 4 days after my parents arrived a group of politicians came to the hospital from the 3 countries that had helped me, Rehman Malik, Pakistan's Interior Minister, William Hague, the British Foreign Minister and Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, Foreign Minister of the UAE. They were not allowed to see me but were briefed by doctors and met my father. He was upset by the minister's visit because Rehman Malik said to him, tell Malala she should give a smile to the nation. He did not know that that was the one thing I could not do. Rehman Malik had revealed that my attacker was a Talib called Atalia Khan who he said had been arrested in 2009 during the military operation in Swat but freed after 3 months. There were media reports that he had done a physics degree at Jahanzeb College. Malik claimed the plan to shoot me was hatched in Afghanistan. He said he had put a $1 million bounty on the head of Atalia and promised they would find him. He doubted that, as no one has ever been caught, not the killer of Benazir Bhutto, not whoever was behind the plane crash that killed General Zia, not the assassin of our first Prime Minister, Liaquat Ali Khan. Only 2 people had been arrested after my shooting, our poor dear driver Usman Baijan and the school accountant, who had taken the call from Usman Baijan to say what had happened. He was released after a few days but Usman Baijan was still in army custody as they said they would need him to identify people. We were very upset about that. Why had they arrested Usman Baijan and not Atalia? The United Nations announced they were designating November 10, 1 month, and a day after the shooting, Malala Day. I didn't pay much attention as I was preparing for a big operation the following day to repair my facial nerve. The doctors had done tests with electrical impulses and it had not responded, so they concluded it was cut and they needed to operate soon or my face would remain paralyzed. The hospital had been giving regular updates to journalists about how I was doing but did not tell them about this to keep it private. I was taken into theater on November 11 for a surgeon called Richard Irving to carry out the operation. He had explained to me that this nerve controlled the side of my face, and its job was to open and close my left eye, move my nose, raise my left eyebrow and make me smile. Repairing the nerve was such delicate work that it took 8.5 hours. The surgeon first cleared my ear canal of scar tissue and bone fragments and discovered that my left eardrum was damaged. Then he followed the facial nerve from the temporal bone where it enters the skull all the way to its exit, and on the way removed many more fragments of bone which had been restricting my jaw movement. He found 2 centimeters of my nerve completely missing where it leaves the skull and rerouted it in front of my ear from its normal passage behind the ear, to make up for the gap. The operation went well, though it was a 3-month wait before the left side of my face started working bit by bit. I had to do facial exercises every day in front of my small mirror. Mr. Irving told me that after 6 months the nerve would start working, though I would never be completely the same. To my delight, I could soon smile and wink my eye, and week by week my parents saw more movement coming into my face. Though it was my face, I could see it was my parents who were happiest to have it back. Afterwards Mr. Irving said it was the best outcome he had seen in 20 years of facial nerve surgery, and it was 86% recovered. The other good result was that finally my headaches lifted and I started reading again. I began with The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, one of a pile of books sent to me by Gordon Brown. I loved reading about Dorothy and how even though she was trying to get back home she stopped and helped those in need like the Cowardly Lion and the Rusty Tin Man. She had to overcome a lot of obstacles to get where she was going, and I thought if you want to achieve a goal, there will be hurdles in your way but you must continue. I was so excited by the book that I read it quickly and afterwards told my father all about it. He was very happy because he thought if I could memorize and narrate such detail then my memory must be fine. I knew my parents were worried about my memory as I told them I didn't remember anything about the shooting and kept forgetting the names of my friends. They weren't very subtle. One day my father asked, "Malala, can you sing us some Pashto Tapi?" I sang a verse we liked: "When you start your journey from the end of a snake's tail / you will end up on its head in an ocean of poison." To us that referred to how the authorities in Pakistan had initially used the militants and now were in a mess of their own making. Then I said, "Actually there's a tapa I want to rewrite." My father looked intrigued. Tapi are the centuries-old collected wisdom of our society. You don't change them. Which one? He asked. This one, I said. If the men cannot win the battle, O my country, then the women will come forth and win you an honor. I wanted to change it to, whether the men are winning or losing the battle, O my country, the women are coming and the women will win you an honor. He laughed and repeated the story to everyone, as he always does. I worked hard in the gym and with the physiotherapist to get my arms and legs working properly again and was rewarded on December 6 with my first trip out of the hospital. I told Emma that I loved nature, so she arranged for 2 staff to take me and my mother on an outing to the Birmingham Botanical Gardens, not far from the hospital. They didn't let my father come as they thought he would be recognized, having been in the media a lot. Even so I was very happy, my first time back in the outside world, seeing Birmingham and England. They told me to sit in the back of the car in the middle, not next to a window, which was annoying as I wanted to see everything in this new country. I didn't realize they were trying to protect my head from any bump. When we entered the gardens and I saw all the green plants and trees, it was a powerful reminder of home. I kept saying, "This one is in my valley," and, "We also have this one." I am very proud of the beautiful plants of my valley. It was odd seeing all the other visitors, for whom it was just a normal day out. I felt like Dorothy at the end of her journey. My mother was so excited she called my father. "For the first time I am happy," she said. But it was ice cold and so we went into the cafe and had delicious tea and cakes, something called a cream tea. 2 days after that I had my first visitor from outside the family, the President of Pakistan, Asif Zardari. The hospital did not want him to come as they knew it would mean a media frenzy, but it was difficult for my father to refuse. Not only was Mr. Zardari our head of state, but he had said the government would pay all my medical bills, which would end up being around £200,000. They had also rented an apartment for my parents in the center of Birmingham so they could move out of the hostel. The visit was on Saturday, December 8, and the whole thing was like something out of a James Bond movie. There were a lot of journalists gathered outside from early on, who naturally assumed the president would be brought to me in the hospital. Instead I was wrapped up in a big purple parka with a hood, taken down through the staff entrance and driven to the hospital offices. We drove right past journalists and photographers, some of whom were up in trees, and they did not even notice. Then I sat and waited in an office, playing a game called Elf Bowling on the computer and beating my brother Atal even though it was the first time I had played it. When Zardari and his party arrived in 2 cars, they were brought in through the back. He came with about 10 people including his chief of staff, his military secretary and the Pakistan High Commissioner in London, who had taken over from Dr. Fiona as my official guardian in the UK till my parents arrived. The president was first briefed by doctors not to mention my face. Then he came in to see me with his youngest daughter Asifa, who is a few years older than me. They brought me a bouquet of flowers. He touched my head, which is our tradition, but my father was worried as I had nothing but skin, no bone to protect my brain, and my head beneath the shawl was concave. Afterwards the president sat with my father, who told him that we were fortunate I had been brought to the UK. She might have survived in Pakistan but she wouldn't have had the rehabilitation and would have been disfigured, he said. Now her smile will return. Mr. Zardari told the High Commissioner to give my father a post as education attaché so he would have a salary to live on and a diplomatic passport so he would not need to seek asylum to stay in the UK. My father was relieved as he was wondering how he would pay for things. Gordon Brown, in his UN role, had also asked him to be his advisor, an unpaid position, and the president said that was fine, he could be both. After the meeting Mr. Zardari described me to the media as a remarkable girl and a credit to Pakistan. But still not everyone in Pakistan was so positive. Though my father had tried to keep it from me, I knew some people were saying he had shot me, or that I wasn't shot at all, and we had staged it so we could live overseas. The new year of 2013 was a happy one when I was discharged from hospital in early January finally to live with my family again. The Pakistan High Commission had rented 2 serviced apartments for us in a building in a modern square in the center of Birmingham. The apartments were on the 10th floor, which was higher than any of us had ever been before. I teased my mother, as after the earthquake when we were in a 3-story building she said she would never again live in an apartment block. My father told me that when they arrived she had been so scared that she had said, "I will die in this lift." We were so happy to be a family again. My brother Kushal was as annoying as always. The boys were bored cooped up waiting for me to recover, away from school and their friends, though Atal was excited by everything new. I quickly realized I could treat them how I liked and I wouldn't get told off. It was a cold winter, and as I watched the snow falling outside through the big glass windows I wished I could run around and chase the snowflakes like we used to back home. Sometimes we went for walks to build up my strength though I tired easily. In the square was a fountain and a Costa coffee bar with glass walls through which you could see men and women chatting and mixing in a way that would be unthinkable in Swat. The apartment was just off Broad Street, a famous road of shops, nightclubs, and strip bars. We went to the shops though I still did not like shopping. At nights our eyes were all out on stocks at the skimpy clothes that women wore, tiny shorts almost like knickers and bare legs on the highest heels even in the middle of winter. My mother was so horrified that she cried, "Garka Shoma. I'm drowning," and begged my father, "Please take me to Dubai. I can't live here." Later we laughed about it. "Are their legs made of iron so they don't feel cold?" asked my mother. We were warned not to be out late on Broad Street on weekend nights as it could be dangerous. This made us laugh. How could it be unsafe compared to where we had come from? Were there Taliban beheading people? I didn't tell my parents but I flinched if an Asian-looking man came close. I thought everyone had a gun. Once a week I Skyped my friends back in Mingora, and they told me they were still keeping a seat in class for me. The teacher had brought to class my Pakistan Studies exam from that day, the day of the shooting. I had got 75 out of 75, but as I never did the others, Malka-e-Noor got first in class. Though I had been getting some schooling at the hospital, I worried that I was falling behind. Now the competition was between Malka-e-Noor and Maniba. "It's boring without you to compete with," Malka-e-Noor told me. I was getting stronger every day, but my surgery wasn't over. I still had the top of my skull missing. The doctors were also concerned about my hearing. When I went for walks I could not understand the words of my mother and father in a crowd. And inside my ear was a tinny noise which only I could hear. On Saturday, February 2nd, I was back in QEH to be operated on, this time by a woman. Her name was Nwen White. First she removed the skull bone from my tummy, but after looking at it decided not to put it back as it had not kept well and there was a risk of infection. Instead she did something called a titanium cranioplasty, I now know lots of medical terms. And fitted a specially molded titanium plate in my head with 8 screws to do the job of a skull and protect my brain. While I was in surgery, Mr. Irving, the surgeon who had repaired my nerve, also had a solution for my damaged left eardrum. He put a small electronic device called a cochlear implant inside my head near the ear and told me that in a month they would fit the external part on my head, and then I should be able to hear. I was in theater 5 hours and I'd had 3 operations, but I didn't feel like I'd had major surgery and was back in the apartment within 5 days. A few weeks later, when the receiver was fitted behind my ear, my left ear heard beep beep for the first time. To start with, everything was like a robot sound, but soon it was getting better and better. We human beings don't realize how great God is. He has given us an extraordinary brain and a sensitive, loving heart. He has blessed us with 2 lips to talk and express our feelings, 2 eyes which see a world of colors and beauty, 2 feet which walk on the road of life, 2 hands to work for us, a nose which smells the beauty of fragrance, and 2 ears to hear the words of love. As I found with my ear, no one knows how much power they have in their each and every organ until they lose one. I thank Allah for the hard-working doctors, for my recovery and for sending us to this world where we may struggle for our survival. Some people choose good ways and some choose bad ways. One person's bullet hit me. It swelled my brain, stole my hearing and cut the nerve of the left side of my face in the space of a second. And after that 1 second there were millions of people praying for my life and talented doctors who gave me my own body back. I was a good girl. In my heart I had only the desire to help people. It wasn't about the awards or the money. I always prayed to God, I want to help people and please help me to do that. A Talib fires 3 shots at point-blank range at 3 girls in a van and doesn't kill any of them. This seems an unlikely story, and people say I have made a miraculous recovery. My friend Shazia, who was hit twice, was offered a scholarship at Atlantic College in Wales, so has also come to the UK for schooling, and I hope Kynette will too. I know God stopped me from going to the grave. It feels like this life is a second life. People prayed to God to spare me, and I was spared for a reason, to use my life for helping people. When people talk about the way I was shot and what happened, I think it's the story of Malala, a girl shot by the Taliban. I don't feel it's a story about me at all. Epilogue: 1 child, 1 teacher, 1 book, 1 pen. Birmingham, August 2013. In March we moved from the apartment to a rented house on a leafy street, but it feels as if we are camping in it. All our belongings are still in Swat. Everywhere there are cardboard boxes full of the kind letters and cards that people send, and in one room stands a piano none of us can play. My mother complains about the murals of Greek gods on the walls and carved cherubs on the ceilings watching her. Our house feels big and empty. It sits behind an electric iron gate and it sometimes seems as if we are in what we in Pakistan call a sub-jail, a kind of luxury house arrest. At the back there is a large garden with lots of trees and a green lawn for me and my brothers to play cricket on. But there are no rooftops to play on, no children fighting with kites in the streets, no neighbors coming in to borrow a plate of rice or for us to ask for 3 tomatoes. We are just a wall's distance from the next house, but it feels miles away. If I look out, I see my mother wandering around the garden, her head covered by a shawl, feeding the birds. She looks as if she is singing, maybe that topish she likes, "Don't kill doves in the garden / you kill one and the others won't come." She is giving the birds the remains of our dinner from the night before and there are tears in her eyes. We eat much the same here as we did back home, rice and meat for lunch and dinner, while breakfast is fried eggs, chapatis and sometimes also honey, a tradition started by my little brother Atal, though his favorite Birmingham discovery is Nutella sandwiches. But there are always leftovers. My mother is sad about the waste of food. I know she is remembering all the children we fed in our house, so they would not go to school on empty stomachs, and wondering how they are faring now. When I came home from school in Mingora, I never found my house without people in it. Now I can't believe that I used to plead for a day of peace and some privacy to do my school work. Here the only sound is of the birds and Kushal's Xbox. I sit alone in my room doing a jigsaw puzzle and long for guests. We didn't have much money and my parents knew what it was like to be hungry. My mother never turned anyone away. Once a poor woman came, hot, hungry and thirsty, to our door. My mother let her in and gave her food and the woman was so happy. I touched every door in the Mohalla and this was the only one open, she said. May God always keep your door open, wherever you are. I know my mother is lonely. She was very sociable. All the women of the neighborhood used to gather in the afternoons on our back porch and women who worked in other houses came to rest. Now she is always on the phone to everyone back home. It's hard for her here as she does not speak any English. Our house has all these facilities, but when she arrived they were all mysteries to her and someone had to show us how to use the oven, washing machine, and the TV. As usual my father doesn't help in the kitchen. I tease him, Abba, you talk of women's rights, but my mother manages everything. You don't even clear the tea things. There are buses and trains but we are unsure about using them. My mother misses going shopping in China Bazaar. She is happier since my cousin Shah came to stay. He has a car and takes her shopping, but it's not the same as she can't talk to her friends and neighbors about what she bought. A door bangs in the house and my mother jumps. She jumps these days at the slightest noise. She often cries then hugs me. Malala is alive, she says. Now she treats me as if I was her youngest rather than eldest child. I know my father cries too. He cries when I push my hair to the side and he sees the scar on my head, and he cries when he wakes from an afternoon nap to hear his children's voices in the garden and realizes with relief that one of them is still mine. He knows people say it's his fault that I was shot, that he pushed me to speak up like a tennis dad trying to create a champion, as if I don't have my own mind. It's hard for him. All he worked for over almost 20 years has been left behind, the school he built up from nothing, which now has 3 buildings with 1,100 pupils and 70 teachers. I know he felt proud at what he had created, a poor boy from that narrow village between the Black and White Mountains. He says, it's as if you planted a tree and nurtured it, you have the right to sit in its shade. His dream in life was to have a very big school in Swat providing quality education, to live peacefully and to have democracy in our country. In Swat he had achieved respect and status in society through his activities and the help he gave people. He never imagined living abroad and he gets upset when people suggest we wanted to come to the UK. A person who has 18 years of education, a nice life, a family, you throw him out just as you throw a fish out of water for speaking up for girls' education. Sometimes he says we have gone from being IDPs to EDPs, externally displaced persons. Often over meals we talk about home and try to remember things. We miss everything, even the smelly stream. My father says, if I had known this would happen, I would have looked back for a last time just as the Prophet did when he left Mecca to migrate to Medina. He looked back again and again. Already some of the things from Swat seem like stories from a distant place, like somewhere I have read about. My father spends much of his time going to conferences on education. I know it's odd for him that now people want to hear him because of me, not the other way round. I used to be known as his daughter, now he's known as my father. When he went to France to collect an award for me he told the audience, in my part of the world most people are known by their sons. I am one of the few lucky fathers known by his daughter. A smart new uniform hangs on my bedroom door, bottle green instead of royal blue, for a school where no one dreams of being attacked for going to classes or someone blowing up the building. In April I was well enough to start school in Birmingham. It's wonderful going to school and not having to feel scared as I did in Mingora, always looking around me on my way to school, terrified a Talib would jump out. It's a good school. Many subjects are the same as at home, but the teachers have PowerPoint and computers rather than chalk and blackboards. We have some different subjects: music, art, computer studies, home economics, where we learn to cook, and we do practicals in science, which is rare in Pakistan. Even though I recently got just 40% in my physics exam, it is still my favorite subject. I love learning about Newton and the basic principles the whole universe obeys. But like my mother, I am lonely. It takes time to make good friends like I had at home, and the girls at school here treat me differently. People say, "Oh, that's Malala," they see me as Malala, girls' rights activist. Back in the Kushal school I was just Malala, the same double-jointed girl they had always known, who loved to tell jokes and drew pictures to explain things. Oh, and who was always quarreling with her brother and best friend. I think every class has a very well-behaved girl, a very intelligent or genius girl, a very popular girl, a beautiful girl, a girl who is a bit shy, a notorious girl. But here I haven't worked out yet who is who. As there is no one here I can tell my jokes to, I save them and tell them to Maniba when we Skype. My first question is always, "What's the latest news at the school?" I love to hear who is fighting with who, and who got told off by which teacher. Maniba came first in class in the most recent exams. My classmates still keep the seat for me with my name on it, and at the boys' school Sir Amjad has put a big poster of me at the entrance and says he greets it every morning before going into his office. I describe life in England to Maniba. I tell her of the streets with rows of identical houses, unlike home, where everything is different and higgledy-piggledy, and a shack of mud and stones can stand next to a house as big as a castle. I tell her how they are lovely solid houses which could withstand floods and earthquakes but have no flat roofs to play on. I tell her I like England because people follow rules, they respect policemen and everything happens on time. The government is in charge and no one needs to know the name of the army chief. I see women having jobs we couldn't imagine in SWAT. They are police and security guards, they run big companies and dress exactly as they like. I don't often think about the shooting, though every day when I look in the mirror it is a reminder. The nerve operation has done as much as it can. I will never be exactly the same. I can't blink fully and my left eye closes a lot when I speak. My father's friend Hidayatullah told him we should be proud of my eye. It's the beauty of her sacrifice, he said. It is still not definitely known who shot me, but a man named Atalia Khan said he did it. The police have not managed to find him but they say they are investigating and want to interview me. Though I don't remember exactly what happened that day, sometimes I have flashbacks. They come unexpectedly. The worst one was in June, when we were in Abu Dhabi on the way to perform Umrah in Saudi Arabia. I went to a shopping mall with my mother as she wanted to buy a special burqa to pray in Mecca. I didn't want one. I said I would just wear my shawl as it is not specified that a woman must wear a burqa. As we were walking through the mall, suddenly I could see so many men around me. I thought they were waiting for me with guns and would shoot. I was terrified though I said nothing. I told myself, "Malala, you have already faced death. This is your second life. Don't be afraid, if you are afraid you can't move forward." We believe that when we have our first sight of the Kaaba, the black shrouded cube in Mecca that is our most sacred place, any wish in your heart is granted by God. When we prayed at the Kaaba, we prayed for peace in Pakistan and for girls' education, and I was surprised to find myself in tears. But when we went to the other holy places in the desert of Mecca where the Prophet lived and preached, I was shocked that they were littered with empty bottles and biscuit wrappers. It seemed that people had neglected to preserve history. I thought they had forgotten the hadith that cleanliness is half of faith. My world has changed so much. On the shelves of our rented living room are awards from around the world, America, India, France, Spain, Italy, and Austria, and many other places. I've even been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, the youngest person ever. When I received prizes for my work at school, I was happy as I had worked hard for them, but these prizes are different. I am grateful for them, but they only remind me how much work still needs to be done to achieve the goal of education for every boy and girl. I don't want to be thought of as the girl who was shot by the Taliban, but the girl who fought for education. This is the cause to which I want to devote my life. On my 16th birthday, I was in New York to speak at the United Nations. Standing up to address an audience inside the vast hall where so many world leaders have spoken before was daunting, but I knew what I wanted to say. This is your chance, Malala, I said to myself. Only 400 people were sitting around me, but when I looked out, I imagined millions more. I did not write the speech only with the UN delegates in mind, I wrote it for every person around the world who could make a difference. I wanted to reach all people living in poverty, those children forced to work, and those who suffer from terrorism or lack of education. Deep in my heart, I hope to reach every child who could take courage from my words and stand up for his or her rights. I wore one of Benazir Bhutto's white shawls over my favorite pink shalwar kameez, and I called on the world's leaders to provide free education to every child in the world. Let us pick up our books and our pens, I said. They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. I didn't know how my speech was received until the audience gave me a standing ovation. My mother was in tears and my father said I had become everybody's daughter. Something else happened that day. My mother allowed herself to be publicly photographed for the first time. As she has lived her life in Purdah and never unveiled her face on camera before, it was a great sacrifice and very difficult for her. At breakfast the next day, Atal said to me in the hotel, "Malala, I don't understand why you are famous. What have you done?" All the time we were in New York he was more excited by the Statue of Liberty, Central Park, and his favorite game Beyblade. After the speech I received messages of support from all over the world, but there was mostly silence from my own country, except that on Twitter and Facebook we could see my own Pakistani brothers and sisters turning against me. They accused me of speaking out of a teen lust for fame. One said, "Forget the image of your country, forget about the school." She would eventually get what she was after, a life of luxury abroad. I don't mind. I know people say these things because they have seen leaders and politicians in our country who make promises they never keep. Instead, things in Pakistan are getting worse every day. The endless terrorist attacks have left the whole nation in shock. People have lost trust in each other, but I would like everyone to know that I don't want support for myself, I want the support to be for my cause of peace and education. The most surprising letter I got after my speech was from a Taliban commander who recently escaped from prison. His name was Adnan Rashid and he used to be in the Pakistan Air Force. He had been in jail since 2003 for attempting to assassinate President Musharraf. He said the Taliban had attacked me not for my campaign for education but because I tried to malign their efforts to establish the Islamic system. He said he was writing to me because he was shocked by my shooting and wished he could have warned me beforehand. He wrote that they would forgive me if I came back to Pakistan, wore a burqa and went to a madrasa. Journalists urged me to answer him, but I thought, who is this man to say that? The Taliban are not our rulers. It's my life, how I live it is my choice. But Mohammed Hanif wrote an article pointing out that the good thing about the Taliban letter was that many people claim I wasn't shot yet here they were accepting responsibility. I know I will go back to Pakistan, but whenever I tell my father I want to go home, he finds excuses. No, Yani, your treatment is not complete, he says, or, these schools are good. You should stay here and gather knowledge so you can use your words powerfully. He is right. I want to learn and be trained well with the weapon of knowledge. Then I will be able to fight more effectively for my cause. Today we all know education is our basic right. Not just in the West, Islam too has given us this right. Islam says every girl and every boy should go to school. In the Quran it is written, God wants us to have knowledge. He wants us to know why the sky is blue and about oceans and stars. I know it's a big struggle. Around the world there are 57 million children who are not in primary school, 32 million of them girls. Sadly, my own country Pakistan is one of the worst places. 5.1 million children don't even go to primary school, even though in our constitution it says every child has that right. We have almost 50 million illiterate adults, 2/3 of whom are women, like my own mother. Girls continue to be killed and schools blown up. In March there was an attack on a girls' school in Karachi that we had visited. A bomb and a grenade were tossed into the school playground just as a prize-giving ceremony was about to start. The headmaster, Abdur Rashid, was killed and 8 children hurt between the ages of 5 and 10. One 8-year-old was left disabled. When my mother heard the news, she cried and cried. When our children are sleeping we wouldn't even disturb a hair on their heads, she said, but there are people who have guns and shoot them or hurl bombs. They don't care that their victims are children. The most shocking attack was in June in the city of Quetta when a suicide bomber blew up a bus taking 40 pupils to their all-girls college. 14 of them were killed. The wounded were followed to the hospital and some nurses were shot. It's not just the Taliban killing children. Sometimes it's drone attacks, sometimes it's wars, sometimes it's hunger. And sometimes it's their own family. In June 2 girls my age were murdered in Gilgit, which is a little north of Swat, for posting a video online showing themselves dancing in the rain wearing traditional dress and headscarves. Apparently their own stepbrother shot them. Today Swat is more peaceful than other places, but there are still military everywhere, 4 years after they supposedly removed the Taliban. Fazlullah is still on the loose and our bus driver still under house arrest. Our valley, which was once a haven for tourists, is now seen as a place of fear. Foreigners who want to visit have to get a no-objection certificate from the authorities in Islamabad. Hotels and craft shops are empty. It will be a long time before tourists return. Over the last year I've seen many other places, but my valley remains to me the most beautiful place in the world. I don't know when I will see it again, but I know that I will. I wonder what happened to the mango seed I planted in our garden at Ramadan. I wonder if anyone is watering it so that one day future generations of daughters and sons can enjoy its fruit. Today I looked at myself in a mirror and thought for a second. Once I had asked God for 1 or 2 extra inches in height, but instead He made me as tall as the sky, so high that I could not measure myself. So I offered the 100 rakat nafil prayers that I had promised if I grew. I love my God. I thank my Allah. I talk to Him all day. He is the greatest. By giving me this height to reach people, He has also given me great responsibilities. Peace in every home, every street, every village, every country, this is my dream. Education for every boy and every girl in the world. To sit down on a chair and read my books with all my friends at school is my right. To see each and every human being with a smile of happiness is my wish. I am Malala. My world has changed but I have not. Glossary Abba, affectionate Pashto term, Father ANP, Awami National Party, Pashtun Nationalist Political Party Baba, affectionate term for grandfather or old man Badal, Revenge Babai, affectionate Urdu term, literally my brother's wife Bai, affectionate Urdu term, literally my B. Rather chapati, unleavened flatbread made from flour and water dina, open-backed van or truck fata, federally administered tribal areas, region of Pakistan bordering Afghanistan governed under a system of indirect rule started in British times hadith, saying or sayings of the Prophet, P.C. E be upon him Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, along with the confession of faith, daily prayer, fasting during Ramadan and almsgiving, which every Muslim who can afford to should perform once in their lifetime haram, prohibited in Islam hajjera, traditional pa. Shtun meeting place for men Imam, local preacher IDP, internally displaced person ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence, Pakistan's biggest intelligence agency Jamaat-e-Islami, Party of Islam, Pakistan Conservative Party Chwi, Jamiat Ulama-e-Islam, Assembly of Islamic Clergy, Pakistan Conservative VE political party closely linked to the Afghan Taliban which advocates strict enforcement of Islamic law Yani, Dear One Yani Mun, Soulmate Jihad, Holy War or Internal Struggle Jirga, Tribal Assembly Kiista, Handsome One Khan, Local Lord KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, literally area of Pa. Shtuns, until 2010 called Northwest Frontier Province, one of the 4 provinces of Pakistan Lashkar, local militia-led, Lashkar-e-Taiba, literally Army of the Pure, one of Pakistan's oldest and most powerful militant groups, active in Kashmir and with close links to the ISI Madrasa, SCH. OL for Islamic Instruction Maulana, Mufti, Islamic Scholar Mohalla, District MQM, Mutahida Qawmi Movement, Karachi-based party representing Muslims who fled India at partition, 1947, Nang, Honor PML, Pakistan Muslim League, conservative political party founded in 1962 as successor to T. Muslim League, the only major party in Pakistan at partition, which was banned in 1958 along with all other parties PPP, Pakistan People's Party, center-left party founded by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1967, later led by his daughter Benazir and currently co-chaired by her husband Asif Zardari. And their son Bilawal Pushtunwali, traditional behavioral code of Pashtuns per, hereditary Saint Pisho, Katpurda, of women, segregation or seclusion, wearing the veil Qawmi, national sabar, patience shalwar kamise/salwar kamise, traditional outfit of loose tunic and trousers worn by both men and women Surah, chapter of the Holy Quran Surah, practice of resolving a tribal feud by handing over a woman or young girl talib, religious student, but has come to mean member of Taliban militant group Tapa/Tapi, plural, genre of Pashto folk poetry having 2 lines, the first line with 9 syllables, the second with 13. Tarbur, literally cousin, but also enemy TNSM, Tahriki Nafazi Sharia-e Mohammadi, movement for the enforcement of Islamic law, founded in 1992 by Sufi Muhammad, later taken over by his son-in-law Maulana Fazlullah, also known as the Swat Taliban TTP, Tehrik-i Taliban Pakistan, Pakist. And Taliban Umrah, lesser pilgrimage to Mecca which can be made at any time during the year. Acknowledgements. The last year has shown me both the extreme hatred of man and the limitless love of God. So many people have helped me that it would take a whole new book to name them all here, but I would like to thank everyone in Pakistan and all round the world who prayed for me, all the school children, students and other supporters who rose when I fell. I am grateful for every petal of the bouquets and every letter of the cards and messages. I was very lucky to be born to a father who respected my freedom of thought and expression and made me part of his peace caravan, and a mother who not only encouraged me but my father too in our campaign for peace and education. I have been blessed too with teachers, especially Miss Ulfat, who taught me a lot beyond textbooks such as patience, tolerance, and manners. Many people have described my recovery as miraculous, and for this I would particularly like to thank the doctors and nurses at Swat Central Hospital, CMH Peshawar, and AFIC Rawalpindi, especially my heroes Colonel Junaid and Dr. Mumtaz, who carried out the right operation at the right time or I would have died. Thanks also to Brigadier Aslam, who saved my major organs from failure after surgery. I am extremely grateful to General Kayani, who took a keen interest in my treatment, and to President Zardari and his family, whose love and care kept me strong. Thanks to the UAE government and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed for the use of their plane. Dr. Javed Kayani made me laugh in my gloomy days and was like a father to me. He was the man behind my treatment in the UK and first-class rehabilitation. Dr. Fiona Reynolds was a great source of comfort to my parents in Pakistan and to me in the UK, and I thank her too for daring to tell me the truth about my tragedy. The staff at Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Birmingham have been amazing. Julie and her team of nurses were so kind to me, and Beth and Kate were not only nurses but like loving sisters. I'd particularly like to thank Imi Chaudhary, who took great care of me and made sure I had everything I needed, even going on daily KFC runs. Richard Irving deserves a particular mention for his surgery to restore my smile, as does Mrs. Anwen White, who restored my skull. Fiona Alexander not only managed the media superbly but went far beyond, even helping to arrange schooling for me and my brothers, always with a smile. Rihanna Siddiq has been a wonderful comfort with her spiritual therapy. Thanks to Shiza Shahid and her family for all their incredible kindness and for helping set up the Malala Fund, and to her company McKinsey for supporting her in doing this. Thank you to all the wonderful people and partner organizations who have helped set up the fund, especially Megan Smith, UN Foundation, Vital Voices, and BeesPace. I am also thankful to Samar Minala for her great support of our cause and the Malala Fund. Great thanks to everyone at Edelman, especially Jamie Lundy and his colleague Laura Crooks. My father would have gone mad without you. Thanks as well to Gordon Brown, who has built on what happened to me to create a worldwide movement for education, and the wonderful staff in his office. And to Ban Ki-moon for being so supportive since the beginning. Thanks to Pakistan's former High Commissioner in London, Wajid Shamsul Hassan, and especially to Aftab Hassan Khan, the head of Chancery, and his wife Aram Jilani, who were a great support. We were strangers and they helped us adjust to this land and find a place to live. Also thanks to driver Shahid Hussain. On the book, our special thanks to Christina, who turned into reality what was just a dream. We never imagined how a lady not from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Pakistan could show such remarkable love and understanding of our country. We have been extremely lucky to have a literary agent like Carolina Sutton, who has thrown herself into this project and our cause with such passion and commitment, and also an incredible team of editors. Judy Klein and Arzu Tassin were determined to tell our story in the best way possible. Thanks go to Abdul Hai Kakar, my mentor and great friend of my father, who thoroughly reviewed the book, and my father's friend Inam ul Rahim for his valuable contributions on the history of our region. I would also like to thank Angelina Jolie for her generous contribution to the Malala Fund. Thanks to all the teachers of the Kushal School, who have kept the school alive and maintained it in my father's absence. We thank God for the day a lady called Shahida Chaudhary walked through our door. She has become an incredible support to our family and we have learned from her the real meaning of being a volunteer. Last and not least, I would like to thank Maniba for being such a good and supportive friend and my brothers Kushal and Atal for keeping me still a child. Malala Yousafzai. Any foreigner who has had the good fortune to visit Swat will know how hospitable its people are, and I would like to thank everyone who helped me there, particularly Mariam and the teachers and students of the Kushal School, Ahmed Shah in Mingora and Sultan Rome for showing me around Shangla. I would also like to thank General Asim Bajwa, Colonel Abid Ali Askari, Major Tariq, and the team at Inter-Services Public Relations for facilitating my visit. Thanks also to Adam Ellick for generously sharing his notes. In the UK, the staff of Queen Elizabeth Hospital could not have been more helpful, particularly Fiona Alexander and Dr. Kyani. My agent David Godwin was wonderful as always, and it was a real privilege to have as editors Judy Klein and Arzu Tassin. I'm also grateful to Martin Ivans, my editor at the Sunday Times, for allowing me the time for this important project. My husband Paolo and son Laurenco could not have been more understanding as this book took over my life. Above all, thanks to Malala and her wonderful family for sharing their story with me. Christina Lamb. Important events in Pakistan and Swat. August 14, 1947, Pakistan created as the world's first homeland for Muslims. Princely state of Swat joins Pakistan but keeps its special status. 1947, First Indo-Pakistan War. 1948, death of founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. 1951, Pakistan's first Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan assassinated. 1958, General Ayub Khan seizes power in Pakistan's first military coup. 1965, Second Indo-Pakistan War 1969, Swat becomes part of Northwest Frontier Province 1970, Pakistan's first national elections held 1971, Third Indo-Pakistan War. East Pakistan becomes independent Bangladesh 1971, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto becomes first elected Prime Minister 1977, General Zia-ul-Haq takes power in military coup 1979, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto hanged, Soviet invasion of Afghanistan 1988, General Zia and senior army officers killed in plane crash. Elections held, Benazir Bhutto becomes first female prime minister in Islamic world 1989, Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan complete 1990, Benazir Bhutto government dismissed 1991, Nawaz Sharif becomes prime minister 1993, Nawaz Sharif forced to resign by army. Second Benazir Bhutto government 1996, Taliban take power in Kabul 1996, Second Benazir Bhutto government dismissed 1997, Nawaz Sharif forms second government 1998, India conducts nuclear tests, Pakistan does same 1999, Benazir Bhutto and husband Asif Ali Zardari convicted of corruption. Benazir goes into exile, Zardari jailed, General Pervez Musharraf takes power in coup 2001, Al-Qaeda 9/11 attacks on World Trade Center and Pentagon, U.S. bombing of Afghanistan starts, Taliban government overthrown. Osama bin Laden escapes to Pakistan 2004, Pakistan Army starts operation against militants in FATA, first attack on Pakistan by U.S. drone, Zardari goes into exile 2005, Maulana Fazlullah starts radio in Swat. Massive earthquake in Pakistan kills more than 70,000 people 2007, Army storms Red Mosque in Islamabad, Benazir Bhutto returns to Pakistan, Fazlullah sets up Islamic courts, Musharraf sends troops into Swat, launch of Pakistan Taliban. Benazir Bhutto assassinated 2007-9, Taliban extend influence across Swat 2008, Zardari becomes president, Musharraf goes into exile 2009, Fazlullah announces all girls' schools to close in Swat, Pakistan government agrees peace accord with Taliban. Agreement breaks down as Taliban take over Swat. Pakistan Army starts military operation against Taliban in Swat July 2009, Pakistan government declares Taliban cleared from Swat December 2009, President Obama announces extra 33,000 troops for Afghanistan, putting total NATO troops at 140,000 2010, floods across Pakistan kill 2,000 people. 2011, Governor of Punjab Salman Taseer assassinated, Bin Laden killed in Abbottabad, Malala wins Pakistan National Peace Prize October 9, 2012, Malala shot May 2013, Musharraf returns and is arrested, elections go ahead despite Taliban violence. Nawaz Sharif wins to become Prime Minister for third time July 12, 2013, Malala addresses UN in New York on her 16th birthday and calls for free education for all children. A note on the Malala Fund. My goal in writing this book was to raise my voice on behalf of the millions of girls around the world who are being denied their right to go to school and realize their potential. I hope my story will inspire girls to raise their voice and embrace the power within themselves, but my mission does not end there. My mission, our mission, demands that we act decisively to educate girls and empower them to change their lives and communities. That is why I have set up the Malala Fund. The Malala Fund believes that each girl, and boy, has the power to change the world and that all she needs is a chance. To give girls this chance, the fund aspires to invest in efforts that empower local communities, develop innovative solutions that build upon traditional approaches, and deliver not just basic literacy but the tools, ideas, and networks that can help girls find their voice and create a better tomorrow. I hope that all of you will join this cause so that we can work together to make girls' education and empowerment a true priority once and for all. Please join my mission. Find out more at www.malalafund.org. Join the conversation at www.facebook.com/malalafund and www.twitter.com/malalafund. Picture section: as a baby with my brother Kushal in Mingora, my father's friend Hidayatullah holding me inside our first school building, my maternal grandfather, Malik Janzar Khan, in Shangla, my father's childhood home, our paternal grandfather, Baba, with me and Kh. Ushal in our house in Mingora, reading with my brother Kushal, enjoying the waterfall in Shangla, a school picnic, assembly prayers at Kushal school. At the beginning, people gave lots of money to Fazlullah. The Taliban publicly whipped people making a speech to honor the people killed in the Haji Baba suicide attack performing in a play at school.